I'd like to explain to you something about why and how the Birthing Better skills began to focus on our body. When I gave birth in 1970, Lamaze and the Bradley method were the very first childbirth preparation classes ever taught. And in the US, where I gave birth, there was an extremely high societal expectation that expectant families take this first childbirth preparation class. Imagine that. Before that, there was nothing. I mean, there was barely libraries, there was no computer. Women didn't know anything about childbirth, and fathers were just coming in. Why? It wasn't that the doctors wanted them, we wanted them there. So Lamaze and Bradley focused on breathing techniques and to a degree relaxation. But relaxation is complicated, as we discovered as the hundreds of fathers and mothers developed the Birthing Better skills from the early 70s all the way through the 1980s, because things changed politically and it became easier to have a cesarean because it became safer to have a cesarean, and because cesareans were more demanded by women because there were risks involved in vaginal birth. And in 1970, when there was a 4.5% cesarean rate, 95% of us labored, whether we had a risk or not, whether the outcome was good or not, whether we suffered or not, whether we had a great birth or a tragic birth. So childbirth is always natural and normal. It just is that the word normal means anything that could happen might happen. And the change in cesareans came because my generation started wearing bikinis, and we didn't want to have the scar on our bellies from a classical cesarean. So we demanded that change, and so the doctors came up with a bikini cut. They didn't make that up. We wanted it, our generation. Hello there, because our breech babies might have a problem being born. And I did not want my breech baby to be dead or have cerebral palsy or be injured because of a vaginal birth. So my generation demanded that. The next generation demanded even more. Consider this, Rh negative, Rogium hadn't been invented when I gave birth. So you need to understand that consumers in modern cultures have led to the risk aversion response that the medical community gives us. It's still present today. We have COVID at the moment. What's everybody screaming about? They want a vaccine. They want treatment. That's risk aversion. And if we accept COVID as normal, we might not like it, then why are we doing anything? It's normal and natural that a virus or a pandemic or a bacteria or parasites or an earthquake go through. But as modern people, we demand that there's less risk, and that was true in births. So when Birthing Better families started to develop the skills in the 70s, because there was such a low cesarean rate, we focused on how to cope with the natural occurring pain of childbirth. It's normal and natural for labor pains to hurt. For some people, it doesn't hurt, but for many of us, it's very painful. Women think they're going to die because we can't control it, particularly if we lack skills. And then, once the cesareans began to change in the 80s, the low-lying cesareans became available. They became safer for us who had had classical cesareans and wanted a vaginal birth after a cesarean. They changed from knocking us out during a cesarean to giving us spinals and then epidurals, because we demanded our husbands be with us at the birth of our baby. And we started to want risks involved with labor to be reduced by having cesareans. Just think about this. When I gave birth in 1970, they didn't have ultrasounds. They didn't have Doptones. They didn't have constant fetal monitorings. So we didn't always know when there was a problem with our baby. So what we discovered from developing the skills in the 70s, which were sort of an evolution of the childbirth skills. They didn't stem from Lamaze or Bradley. We just knew that those skills didn't particularly work for many of us, and they were targeted to a very small percent of people, although that was perceived as a large percent, which was the low-risk women having a low-risk pregnancy, assuming to have a low-risk birth. But that becomes complicated as well. How many women have health issues before they get pregnant? How many develop health issues or their health issues before get exacerbated? How many babies develop health issues? And what about in birth? So when we consider the word normal and when we consider that childbirth and pregnancy are normal life events, we can't take those words and morph them to the point that we think that the outcome is good and everything is fine. We have to be realistic. And we have to be realistic because if you're going to have a home birth, you need to know the risks. And they're no greater, in fact, there are less risks than driving in a car every day. I mean, the reality is when you go to the Center of Disease Control and find out what dying in childbirth is in terms of the risks of living, it's just way up there in non-existent amounts. Giving birth is like 57 out of 65 common causes of death. And if you start at number 1 and start naming them, by the time you get to 15, they're so esoteric, you wonder why they're common. So dying at a home birth for yourself as a mother or a baby is really minuscule. However, there are risks. And it's the same way. You climb up on your roof, there's a risk you're going to fall off. I mean, really. So what do? You learn skills. You don't put a rickety ladder up against the roof if you're sensible about it. So if you're going to have a home birth, you want to be skilled to prevent any risks from becoming problems. So when we developed the skills to cope with birth, we still found that we had long first and second stages. And that led us to the body work, because what fathers understood was that there was a big object inside this body, and women needed to get this big object out. We, my generation of women, were told to do pelvic floor and Kegel exercises. That was body work. Tighten up now. I mean, just use your common sense, please. Tighten up in there. Does that hinder or help this to come out? Well, back then we thought we were tightening up so we could have strong muscles to push our baby out and to protect our pelvic floor. We can protect our pelvic floor at any other time than in pregnancy. In fact, stop at 24 weeks and pick it up after the birth. For the birth, you want to be open, soft, soften down there now, open up down there. Sit so your sit bones are as far apart down there. Stay soft in everything down there. Does that help or hinder this come through? So when we had long first and second stages, we turned our attention to what fathers affectionately call the exercise and plumbing. So in this lesson, you're going to learn about the overview of the body, that there's a bony pelvis and a soft pelvis, and you're going to do the skills in the body work for the bony pelvis, how to create space in it. Our suggestion is, if you're a pregnant woman, do it first on your partner, because once they feel it in their body, they won't have any difficulty doing this on you. So, and you'll understand more if you do it on their body. So we share the same body. That's why Birthing Better Skills are so impactful. We are one humanity, and men and women are essentially the same human being. So enjoy it. These are wow skills, whoever knew. And just do them. You don't have to keep practicing them. If your body opens up easily, just write it down as notes that you'll take with you, keep with you at the birth, and then use them if you need to. And that goes into the lesson on the progression of labor.